morning.
Morning.
I love having a panel this early in the day. So I wanted to kick this off since I have you two experts here, but I'm going to start with a really dumb question, especially from y'all perspective. As a fan and as a viewer of sports, I kind of always wonder what is so bad about doping. Like, I want to see people jump higher, run faster, swim faster. I want to see records broken. It's exciting to me to think about people reaching the height of what their potential could be. And so from my perspective, as somebody that has no health implications from doping, like, as a viewer, why should I care whether or not people dope?
Go ahead, Allison.
Well, there are rules of play, and doping kind of, in my mind, goes under that umbrella. So there are reasons those rules are in place. Doping, many banned performance-enhancing drugs are dangerous to a person's health. People don't all have access to these drugs, so it would be an unfair playing field.
Yeah, I guess I would just echo. I mean, I think it's a really important question that I sometimes will get from the taxi driver or the bartender, right? Like, why do we care? And I think if you stripped away that rule, and so it's not cheating, it is entertainment, they're adults. From our perspective, I think there's 4 natural outcomes that are totally bad for sport and bad for society. One, it wouldn't be fair. It wouldn't be a level playing field because the drugs interact differently. The athletes themselves call it responders versus non-responders based solely on your makeup. And these are game-changing differences. I think number 2, all you do is draw the line in a different spot. Because if 100 milliliters of testosterone is okay for you from a health standpoint, but 200 is going to give you a performance advantage, which it will, then athletes are just going to, it's an arms race all over again. I think 3, you gotta ask yourself, and it's more of a philosophical question, what is sport? And we like the Tour de France or NFL football, not because it's machines or cyborgs. Now, there is esports, right, and there is NASCAR, but human competition is exactly that. It's not something that is, and maybe we're drawing different lines as society progresses. And then I guess just the 4th point that I would say is from, a trickle-down effect. If you have to do it to make a major league team, let's say, or a professional team, you're then going to have to do it to make a college team, right, which means you're going to have to do it to make a high school team. And I've got 3 kids, all who play at young ages. I don't want to have to make a decision to give my kids steroids or EPO or human growth hormone or insulin that would have negative consequences to their long-term health to make an 8-year-old soccer team. And I think, unfortunately, that's what you would see ultimately happen.
Yeah, so it's more looking at the whole approach and sort of the future of the sports and athletes themselves. From your perspective, because, you competed at the highest level there is, did you ever compete against people who you knew were doping or later found out to be doping?
Yeah, so I competed against different kinds of doping athletes. I competed against athletes who knew they were doping. I competed against athletes who were being doped and weren't aware of the fact that they were being doped.
How can you not be aware that you're being doped?
Well, on occasion, young athletes are given supplements, and they're not in a position in which they have outside influences. So they just do what their coaches tell them to do without question. And that takes many different forms, but people can be doped and not be aware of it, especially if they're doped from a very young age. So as you're older, if you are beginning doping and you're not aware of what you're taking, you may see changes in your body that seem unnatural. And in some cases, people say, well, maybe it is natural. And in some cases, people say, wait a second, something's going on here.
Yeah.
I would just, echo that that's a really important point. And we've seen in this Russia case, and we saw it a little bit in our Postal Services case, where the culture has put, to win, it's not just now win, it's win at all costs. And so the pressures that are put on, whether it's young athletes like swimmers in Allison's sport, who can, peak at the age of 16, 17 sometimes, or you're a professional athlete, when the culture puts so much pressure on you to, break the rule. And let's be clear, there are rules, and sport is essentially, right, an agreement of the rules.
Right.
So you're intentionally breaking the rule when you do it. And I think athletes have choices, but when the culture is such that puts so much pressure and essentially abuses athletes where they have no choice, we've experienced that in this Russia situation. And look, I think the state abused its own athletes by, they didn't tie them down and inject them with these dangerous drugs, but they gave them no other out. If they wanted to be employed, if they wanted to make a team, if they didn't want to, have to go right out of, as soon as they were old enough to walk, working at a manufacturing plant for the rest of their lives, if they wanted any choice at success on an international stage, they had to participate in the program. And that's a culture that, is unfortunate, is not fair, and that we should do, I think, everything to avoid that from happening.
Yeah, I'm so curious about what you said about that, because knowing how hard athletes train and just knowing that what we love about competition and seeing peak human performance, the community of athletes that, knows about each other and they compete and get to know, what you're eating, how you're training, one-upping each other in that level of competition. What does doping do to the athlete community? Because I'm imagining if you competed against people that didn't know they were doping and later figured it out, how does that affect your self-esteem or what you know about your own identity as an athlete?
Well, it taints the community. I'd like to be a part of protecting what I think is so valuable about the Olympic movement, which is the Olympic spirit. And I define that as pursuing excellence with integrity. And when you're in it, you feel much like I think a lot of the public felt in watching the Rio Games. You just feel like something as pure as that Olympic spirit shouldn't be tainted by something as dirty as a corrupt system allowing doping infractions to take place or not properly enforcing the rules. So it's upsetting. It destroys the faith that athletes have in the rules being upheld. It disturbs the dedication that athletes could be giving to their sport. People drop out. There's lots of things that happen as a result, but the overall message that is sent to everybody is that, okay, we're going to say that the system and the spirit is going to be protected, but then it's not.
Yeah. Gotcha. I'm also curious because, let's be frank, winning comes with benefits, especially within the Olympic model. You win a lot, you get a lot of medals, that increases your sponsorships, it puts you on a Wheaties box, that sort of thing. So from the perspective of an athlete who's clean, what is the cost to you of not doping?
Well, a lot. Personally, lost accomplishments. I would have had 3 more gold medals and another world record.
Wow.
Lost opportunities like sponsorships. My situation was unique, but my college scholarship was removed because I won a silver medal and not a gold.
Wow.
Lost faith in the system. I experienced years of depression, and the International Olympic Committee wasn't paying for my therapy. So these are things I don't want to see other athletes experience because the effects can be long-lasting, and not just in that frame of time in which you're a successful athlete, but these athletes that are competing today are dedicating themselves, as I did, with hard work and maximizing their ability, and they should be rewarded. And oftentimes they aren't because the system isn't being policed effectively. So all those sponsorship dollars, all those opportunities that could be won, and just individual human, rights to have a clean opportunity for clean sport is not being protected, and that does a lot to people in varying ways.
Travis,
I would just echo. I think it's she and Allison articulated it extremely well from a personal side. To us, it is the biggest injustice in sport when, whether it's an individual athlete or a team, loses because someone else who they were competing against, intentionally breaks the rules to gain a competitive advantage. And while it's easy to say, why do we care? All they're harming is themselves, if anyone. No, at the end of the day, there are victims of doping, and those are the athletes who are there agreeing to the rules, playing by the rules, working their tails off, foregoing other opportunities, whether it's education or otherwise, in order to be the best that they can be, whether it's to represent the U.S. Or any other country in the Olympic Games, or as a professional athlete or a college athlete, to essentially be robbed of your opportunity, to me, is the biggest equal opportunity, equal rights discussion that centers around athletes today, I think.
And something else, Olympic sport is a little different than some other sports in that if you don't win the gold medal, you oftentimes don't get access to any opportunity. So it's even more important that doping is monitored effectively.
Yeah. You hear that, and you can certainly understand the motivation for your job and the role you have. But when you think about the fact that you're going up against not just individual dopers, but state-sanctioned doping in the case with Russia, where unless there are whistleblowers who come forward, how would you ever know or begin to tackle that problem? In Russia, from your chair, was that preventable? Is there any way from the outside to sort of affect change there?
Yeah, I think so. There is a global regulator known as WADA, and not to get too much in the weeds, but they're the body, the organization at the world level who's responsible for ensuring the rules of sport that we've all agreed to are enforced and are followed by whether it's a state like Russia or individual federations or teams. And unfortunately, they, in our opinion, were conflicted and essentially had handcuff someone in a blindfold and didn't do the job that they should have done early enough. And thank God, a female competitor and her husband from the Russia national team in track and field came forward and exposed this problem. Investigations then ensued and demonstrated that, yeah, this was not just poor anti-doping system, so poor testing. This was intentional, funding of the drugs, conspiracy to hide positive tests, to knowingly send athletes to the largest stage, the Olympic Games, World Championships in certain sports, swimming and track and field, to essentially rob and defraud from other countries.
Yeah, when I think about that and knowing some of the proposals that you've been very important to suggesting, that idea of WADA's independence or conflict in testing, what can be done there to sort of separate and remove conflict from the building, especially when you're thinking about the fact that prior to getting to the Olympics, all of the individual countries are sort of running their own testing, but might be a little bit behind the doping. So.
Yeah, our solution is pretty simple. You have to remove the fox from guarding the hen house.
Right.
And you can't have sport, who is wonderful at promoting itself and putting fans in the seats and having an awesome display on NBC or whatever channel you watch the sports on, and then want to take action that might be contrary to that success. And that's the promoting policing aspect that we've been loud and clear has to be separated. That's what's happened in the United States. We think it's been effective because you're not conflicted in making tough decisions, whether it's to bring a case against Lance Armstrong or any other athlete. You're not weighing in your mind the negative impact financially on your brand as a sports organizer. You're just there following the oath that you've taken to, ensure the rights of clean athletes are ultimately protected. So our solution is pretty simple in just removing that conflict of interest at the world level, and then I think it goes a long way in solving the problem.
Yeah, Allison, you can speak to that a little bit. I know that the USOC and what their testing regulations are seem a little bit onerous to me, but in competition, if you are getting that level of testing from your governing body, but you see that certain teams are not, they don't get the same testing, like, are you up in arms about that? Is that an injustice to you, or are you just proud of the fact that you know that the U.S. is sort of more proactive about this?
Well, you want to be up in arms, but you have no arms. I mean, it's a very frustrating position to be in because as an athlete, as in my experience and in many athletes' experience, you commit to all of these, following all of these rules, and you're reporting where you are every day so that doping agents can find you, so you can produce a urine sample that then can be tested. You're showing up at competition and providing yourself to be available for testing. You're doing everything that you're supposed to be doing, but then you see and hear of instances in which other people aren't. And it's very frustrating, it's unjust, and it's unfair. In my Olympic experience, I've heard and saw many people experiencing different testing protocols than I did, and that shouldn't be happening. Yeah. In one case, somewhere in the world, somebody should be tested in the same way that somebody's tested in another part of the world. It should be across the board. Everybody should be treated in the same way. And I'd really love to see the doping infractions being treated like violations of rules of play. If you in swimming decide that on the day of the Olympics you're going to invent a new way to do a turn, that's great, but if it violates the rules of that turn, you can expect to get disqualified. Unfortunately, if you show up at the Olympics now and you say, well, I've been doping, there's a chance I'm going to get away with it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to not expect to get disqualified. So I'd like to see those two things treated in the same way, and more importantly, the perspective from athletes and coaches to be the same.
Right.
You can expect to be disqualified.
Yeah.
Knowing full well that in a perfect society, if you fix everything, it's just human nature that people are going to still try and cheat. They will invent another way to get around testing. People try new types of drugs that trace levels go down. What in your mind can be helped by technology in this space? Like, I know you have to stay one step ahead of what's on the horizon, knowing full well that, people have a lot of motivations to do.
Yeah, listen, I think, and it's why we're here, we think it's the ultimate solution to protecting athletes' rights. And, we give $3+ million a year to research, to better develop tests, and we've, partnered with nanotechnology companies, blood spot companies. So we're always, one of our pillars is innovation. And we firmly believe that the innovation on the technological and the scientific side is absolutely critical to us having the best tests, to ensure they're robust and they, say what they're supposed to say, and provide that sort of playing field where athletes can have confidence, knowing the rules are going to be enforced consistently at a cost basis that makes sense, and that sport will have no other choice but to put in place. I think is critically important, and we would ask everyone here to, look at the Partnership for Clean Competition or other ideas you might have that can transfer into our world. And it's a wonderful opportunity to serve a great mission and help athletes achieve their success doing it the right way.
Yeah, I wish I could spend more time talking to y'all about that, and I know from these people's perspective, they want to talk to you about tech and what can be done in the space, but that's our time. So I want to thank y'all for coming out, and everybody who attended. Thank y'all.
Thank you.